Let's go to Genesis 15. We're going to talk about this idea of a covenant when we talk about this idea of justification. So I have a picture up there. Can anybody tell me what that's a picture of? Yeah, and this is still a practice in the Middle East, and a lot of the Middle East is fascinating. The reason why it's so difficult a lot of times. Has anybody watched Lone Survivor? Right? Marcus Dupree, is that his name? Marcus Luttrell. Luttrell. There are so many different dialects in the Middle East that they're really tribe to tribe. So it's not like French and Spanish and different languages. There's almost different dialects among all the different tribes. So they actually have a very difficult time reaching with the gospel because so many different little nuances in language. This is from Middle East. They even to today they'll do it in a lot of these tribes, how you make a promise to one another. So literally, you remember the old days where all you did is shake someone's hand, give you my word. Now it's like 15 documents and all these notaries and everything. In those days, they would take an animal when they were making a promise. They'd cut the animal in half. They'd lay the two halves down, and the person making the promise walks between the animals. Right? If it's both. If it's only a one way, it's one. Who's ever involved in the promise walks between the animals. And it literally is saying, may what happened to this animal happen to me if I don't keep my promise. When I was teaching this once years ago, it was Missions Week, and we had a missionary from one of the Middle East countries, and he jumped up all excited, and he said, can I explain this? And he came up in front of class and explained how it works. So, again, when we think of what I like to do, apologetics, defending the faith with truth, I mean, literally, God gives us a picture of something that we know is true. It still exists today. So let's go ahead and take a look at this in Genesis. So go to Genesis 15. You guys there? All right, this is one of my favorite beginnings in a chapter in the Bible, where in verse 1 it says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, don't be afraid, Abram. I'm your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Notice he didn't call him Abraham, called him Abram. But what is the reason God gives Abram for why he shouldn't be afraid with the vision? What's the reason he gives?
Because God would protect him. He would shield him.
All right, he says he's his shield. What else? Well, what does it say? Go ahead and read it, Ty.
I am your shield, your very great reward.
All right. That's all he says. He doesn't say, I'm your shield and one day you're going to get a great reward. He doesn't say that. He says, I am your great reward. Guys, all right. I did this with Devin and Raven. I did their wedding. And when I was doing their marriage counseling, I was saying, do you understand, Devin, that Raven is the fulfillment of Genesis 15:1 for you? She is your exceedingly great reward. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, it's not like the two of you are saying, hey, we've got a great idea. I think with two incomes, we can make a lot more money, and we'll get a great tax break. And I really want to have a kid, and the only way I can do it is if I marry somebody. So I think this could work out really great for both of us.
Nope.
That's not how it works, right? Why do people get married? Right. So something's happening here. Well, last week we watched Francis Chan's video where he talked about being a great God. And remember, he was giving that example where they were taking care of like an 18-year-old girl, and the guy who was dating her told her, said, I just don't know if it's working out that great between us. And when she asked him why, he said, well, all my life I pictured, this is out in California, I picture being married to some hot surfer chick, who was really into fashion and everything, but, I guess for now I can settle on you and, we could get to know each other better. Do you remember that? And remember the reaction in his church when he told this true story? People went, yeah, that makes sense. No. What did people do? They went nuts. They went nuts. And they said, What did you do? What did you do? Right? And he said, well, I told her, don't you dare keep dating this guy. You need to dump him. Why? Why would you dump him? God is saying to Abram in Genesis 15:1, I'm your great reward. This dude in California in Francis Chan's church didn't view her as his great reward. That's why when you read the Gospels, when Jesus says things like, look, if you're not willing to forsake your mother and father, for me, you're not worthy of me. If you're putting yourself back to the plow instead of following me, you're not worthy of me. That's because in Genesis 15:1, he explained himself back in 1450 BC and said, I'm a great God. I'm your great reward. And people don't look at God in the Bible as someone they're in love with. We look at him as someone we serve, like Allah. That's not how he's portrayed in here. He's portrayed as the bridegroom, right? Your husband. We need to look at God as how great he is